Maria Batawan, 68, a widow, came to tell us how in the last 10 days of April, she came to her home, which had been ransacked by 10 military men, and her son was being interrogated. The military man jabbed his long firearm into her stomach. She feared her imminent shooting. Maria Batawan yelled, "Don't! I don't like this. I am a civilian." The military man didn't say anything to me. I was so afraid. I still wake up in the night shaking. I'm so extremely afraid.
The government strategies to handle the urban poor is to give the limited monetary compensation, which is far below the human rights standards, less than 2 months of expenses of a whole family, settle them in some resettlement areas. Usually these places are in far-off places, which is a lack of access to healthcare and education.
Large-scale mining poisons the watershed, destroys ecosystems in this beautiful and fertile country. The indigenous people lack basic services. 90% of the residents have no formal education.
A young lady yesterday, while we were about to visit the prison, came to us and was saying, "We are hopeless each passing day, and it's been 7 months since my husband had been arrested after it was just 2 years of our marriage, and I have lost all hopes." And when people like you come, the hopes are again rejuvenated. And I really pray if something can be done by you guys for us. Like that, it really touched us, made us tears roll down. Like I really hope that time, like, if I could really do something for her, take her husband out of the custody that moment.
Military there had imposed a curfew. There could be no farming before 5 a.m. and no farming after 5 p.m. That has a result on the amount of work that they are able to perform during the day. But Richie, who was about 21, 22, went to go strip abaca from the tree, which is what his family strips from the trees to sell and to make their living. He went before 5 a.m. and the military came and they shot him without firing any warning shot, without giving him any warning at all. They shot him in the back.
A very common experience for many indigenous communities where soldiers woo the young women even if they are already married. And this happened in the rape case that happened in Tinoc, Ifugao, where a young high school student was lured by one of the soldiers who is stationed in Ifugao. They raped her, and until now she's in an unstable condition.
The impunity by which these crimes are committed has never waned. The administration is trying to foster an illusion of sustained and inclusive growth even as it intensifies its pro-imperialist neoliberal economic strategy of privatizing health, water, transportation, and other utilities and services, thus making them even more inaccessible to the people. It also wants to further open the gates for the dumping of imported goods, the insidious operation of hot capital and global financial speculation, and the plunder of the national patrimony through large-scale and destructive mining. Such actions beg the question, whose rights are government promoting and protecting anyway? We trust that through this conference, we are able to discuss the real situation and come up with plans for collective action at the national and international levels. It will also give us a chance to cull lessons from our previous struggles. It is especially important to note that from the Marcos dictatorship up to the present, international pressure has always been a crucial factor in compelling the government to do something about the alarming human rights violations in the country. Human rights is already enshrined in the Philippine Constitution and the various laws in the Philippines. That may be the case on paper, but we also know that human rights is more than just a piece of paper. It is a living and dynamic struggle between the victim and the perpetrator, the oppressed and the oppressor, the freedom fighter and the tyrant. Today, we have gathered to pursue that struggle in behalf of the victims, the oppressed, and all those who yearn for a just and lasting peace. May we all succeed in this mission. Again, in behalf of the organizers and my countrymen, welcome. Long live international solidarity. Mabuhay kayong lahat.
We would like to call on more than 250 delegates of the International Conference for Human Rights and Peace in the Philippines.
This is what international solidarity is all about.
For 3 days in July 2013, 280 delegates from 26 countries gathered for the International Conference for Human Rights and Peace in the Philippines. They are victims of human rights violations, advocates for human rights and peace, members of people's organizations, the academe, faith-based institutions, and people's lawyers. Prior to the conference, international solidarity missions were conducted in Central Luzon, Southern Tagalog, 3 regions in Mindanao Island, the Cordilleras, and the National Capital Region. The missions looked into large-scale mining, land grabbing, forced evacuation, and the plight of internal refugees due to militarization, political repression of people's organizations, forced eviction and demolitions of residential communities, trade union struggles, and the situation of political prisoners.
It's like the period of the psalmist, that this new technology will solve the problems that we have created. In the 1980s or 90s, drones would have been called death squads because they engage in targeted assassinations in community. There is not a technologically quick fix. It will lead to more destruction. It externalizes the media from the battlefield. They hit in remote places, and then the issue is nobody exactly knows.
Where the majority of the people, life is at risk in order to create a situation of well-being for the very, very few. And we become morally activated when we put life and the struggle for life at the center. So how do you save a world where most people live in poverty, and most of those people in poverty are women, children, indigenous people, Dalits, people of color? How do you save this world? You save the banks. What we are dealing with is an empire in decline. As an empire in decline becomes more vicious, more aggressive in order to defend its prerogatives and to keep its interests in place. An empire in decline is never an empire in retreat.
The high food crisis in the world has become the new normal, mainly because of financial speculation in agricultural commodities and also in land. So the issue of high food prices is principally not because people or the world is not producing enough food, but because there is speculation and a control by the TNCs on trade in agriculture.
Both in the Middle East and in relation to the Philippines, there is a struggle in the U.S. that we need to end and abolish the State Department terrorism list of organizations and individuals, because that cuts off conversations, negotiation, and it demonizes whole organizations as opposed to saying certain actions are reprehensible, which are usually the actions of states. And so a terrorism list, by definition, is not states. So get rid of that list.
But human rights could not be negotiated. They were fundamental and never up for negotiation. Their policies are determined by the rights of transnational corporations, the multinational conglomerates that are shaped to make profit from people rather than deliver democracy. In a neo-colonial sense, the neoliberal idea of democracy is to give you a choice, not of your government, but of your choice of toothpaste. That is not democracy, that is capitalism in its most extreme form.
You must define and stress the anti-imperialist and democratic common grounds for the Filipino people and the people of the world in confronting the forces that violate human rights and in striving to develop, expand, and consolidate the movement of international solidarity for upholding, defending, and advancing human rights and people's rights, and for promoting and realizing a just peace in the Philippines.
The conference articulated the progressive framework of human rights and the underlying sense that violations are a systemic problem rooted in the domination of foreign monopoly capitalism and the local elite in the economic, social, cultural, and political life of the country. The delegates focus on the right of the people to resist and to rebel against an unjust system, the right to self-determination, even presenting the legal basis for the assertion of such rights. The conference zeroed in on the role of the state in the commission of civil, cultural, and political rights violations, and in committing state terrorism against its people.
We have learned to transcend the labeling. Why? It was difficult for me to look for my son. It was so painful because every time I talked to somebody, that somebody would tell me, "Oh, your son must have deserved it." But what did I do? I looked at the heart of my son and I knew that what my son did, and most of your friends and all those whom you miss now, they have purer hearts than us. They have purer hearts than those who sit in uniform in government. Why? They give of their lives. They give up everything. And did Jesus not say, "Here, I love you so much. I'll show you how. I'll spread out my hands and die. He who gives his life to somebody else has a pure heart." And I believe that my son has that.
It's time, as we say, for human rights to trump property interests. We must fight to make economic interests adhere to human rights principles. In doing so, we can rewrite the words to masters of war and inscribe into the history books how the people's fight for human rights and peace allowed us to become the masters of peace.
In comparison between the Oplan Bayanihan and the COIN or Counterinsurgency Guide of the United States, we see parallelisms. Oplan Bayanihan is the latest in a long line of counterinsurgency operations that have been drawn by the armed forces of the Philippines under successive governments, 6 governments in all. Each plan have been heavily influenced, if not essentially directed, by the United States defense and military establishment, given the fact that the armed forces of the Philippines has been dependent on its counterpart from the U.S. for both doctrinal and practical training and equipment. Its plan has failed, and it's left in its wake widespread human rights violations across the nation.
What future does the Philippines have? Is it going to be a deputy sheriff? Can it make it? Realpolitik will win out, and as in so many other places, so many other countries, the Americans will swallow all the human rights abuses.
We must do more to support the Filipino people and others who are facing outrageous and barbaric human rights abuses daily. We will also must say we will not be part of US imperialism's plans to dominate our region, and we will not be part of the US imperialism's war plans against China and other countries. We must continue to demand that the US and any other imperialist power get out of our region.
We must join forces not only to lift the sanctions against the Iranian people, but also to end U.S. intervention, because let us make no mistake, the greatest obstacle right now to just and lasting peace in the Middle East continues to be U.S. and Western intervention in these countries.
The Philippines is a country of some 100 million. We are the 2nd largest country in Southeast Asia and the 12th largest in the world. We have vast natural resources. We have 10 million hectares of agricultural land, billions of tons of mineral resources that rank us among the most mineral-rich in the world. We have the 3rd gold reserves, 4th in copper, 5th in nickel, 6th in chromite. We have extensive energy resources, natural gas, geothermal sources, hydropower, wind, wave, solar energy, biomass, even some oil, and rich biodiversity. We rank 25th worldwide out of 220 countries in the number of plant and animal species. These resources are more than enough for us to live a life of dignity amid a just and peaceful society. The top 40 Filipinos alone, their net worth in 2012 was equivalent to the combined income in a whole year of the poorest 70 million Filipinos. Inequality is severe in the country. Despite 3 decades of supposed democratic restoration, the country is not seeing any sort of economic freedom, economic equality, or economic democracy. The government officially counts only some 27 million poor. But to get the 27 million figure, they estimate it using a poverty threshold of 52 pesos. So for the government, if you have 52 pesos, $1.20, they expect every person to be able to provide for all their food needs, non-food needs, shelter, utilities, education, and health. That is absurd. We don't agree. We think 6 to 8 million Filipinos is a much more reasonable figure for poverty in the country.
The conference universally affirmed the primacy of people's struggles for the attainment and protection of human rights and just peace. Delegates shared their experiences in defending people's rights, their challenges, and victories.
This far-going violation of human rights, of fundamental rights, calls for a vigorous and offensive response of the progressive movement. It is important to claim fundamental rights back as the legacy of the progressive movement, while there has been so much demagogical misuse of the term human rights, promoting the idea that the free West is the champion of these rights, while in reality they are the worst violators. Breaking through this smokescreen by exposing the violations of national and international law is a necessity. And combining legal and political arguments into one comprehensive defense that is conducted transparently is another requirement to create the conditions to win such cases and to stop the criminalization. In particular, arguments based on justice, on law, and on the right, the inalienable right of the people to fight for liberation are necessary to be able to arouse public awareness and support, without which a victory in the courtroom is totally impossible.
The revolutionary movement has been able to consolidate and expand. It is now rooted in 70 provinces out of a total of 81 provinces. It has built mass organizations of workers, peasants, women and youth, children, indigenous people, urban poor and fisher folk. The NPA is now operating in more than 110 guerrilla fronts, wherein organs of political power form the backbone of the people's democratic government. The revolutionary people have won the international solidarity and support of revolutionary, anti-imperialist and progressive organizations and individuals from different parts of the world. They are also contributing their solidarity to the just causes of other people's struggles in the spirit of proletarian internationalism and anti-imperialist solidarity.
One of the most important contributions of the churches in the human rights struggles is resourcing the international ecumenical friends and partners. This is the church's historical role in international solidarity since the 1970s.
My highest salute and commendations to all who came. Thank you for going to the areas and spending time with our Karapatan human rights workers. Thank you for taking time out to be with the masses of the people we serve. We value so much your solidarity work with us. We have the highest regard to the work you do in your respective countries in informing the people of the world what is happening here in the Philippines. On behalf of my fellow workers in Karapatan who have been targeted, and in fact, whom 35 of them are not yet here anymore, we salute you and we offer this event. And we hope that they are there with us today.
The people want peace and justice, and they know, we know, it will not be handed to them on a silver platter by those in power. It is something we have to fight for, sacrifice for, die for. The people make use of all forms, all arenas for the struggle. We join and accompany them on the paths that they choose to tread. We know the cost. We have lost not only our comrades and kin, we have lost families and entire villages. And it hurts as much when a fellow human rights defender in our own community is disappeared or assassinated, as it does when that human rights defender is from a village thousands of miles away, but struggling for the same peace and justice we aspire for. As much as it hurts and saddens us, their sacrifice inspires and pushes us to carry on, confident that we are not weakened. On the contrary, we gain strength. We are not alone and isolated. We are everywhere. We will not be defeated. We shall be victorious. we are all cognizant of how crucial international solidarity is to our struggles. We have numerous and outstanding experiences of struggles being given that much needed boost at just the right time to make a difference. Yet we also know that there is much to be done in this department. That is why we have come together now to map out how we can strengthen and expand this solidarity. Long live internationalism, dare to struggle, dare to win.
Bagay tumagdiriya